It started when I was searching for a place to live. The city was expensive. Every apartment I visited was either too small or way out of my budget. After weeks of disappointment, I finally came across an ad that almost felt too good to be true. A spacious one-bedroom apartment at half the price of anything else in the area. When I called the number in the ad, the landlord answered almost immediately. His tone was cheerful, almost unnaturally friendly. He told me I could come by the same day and look at the place. That eagerness should have been my first red flag, but I was desperate. The building looked old from the outside, its bricks faded, windows slightly cracked, yet there was something strangely inviting about it. Inside, the apartment seemed perfectly normal. Freshly painted walls, wooden floors, a small balcony overlooking the street. In daylight it looked harmless, but there was something in the air that made me feel uneasy, a heaviness I could not quite explain. The landlord kept smiling the whole time. He barely let me ask questions, quickly showing me from room to room as if he wanted me to agree before I changed my mind. He even had the paperwork ready, like he knew I would not walk away. I remember standing in the empty living room, trying to convince myself the uneasiness was just in my head. The silence of the apartment felt strange, as if the walls were holding their breath, waiting. Still, the deal was impossible to ignore. Before I knew it, I had signed the lease. Walking out that day, keys in hand, I felt an odd chill crawl down my spine. It was the middle of the afternoon, yet I felt like I was being watched from the dark corners of that empty apartment. The first night in the new apartment felt uneasy from the start. I tried to settle in, arranging a few of my things, cooking a small meal, and telling myself it was just another apartment. By the time I lay down in bed, the silence of the building was overwhelming. It was not the kind of peaceful silence people enjoy. It was heavy, like the entire floor was waiting for something to happen. Around midnight, just as I was drifting off, a sharp knocking sound echoed through the walls. At first I thought it was a neighbor, maybe someone hammering something late at night, but the sound was too deliberate. 3 knocks, slow and evenly spaced, as if someone was on the other side of the wall waiting for me to respond. I sat up, listening closely. The hallway outside was quiet. I tried to shake it off and lay back down, but then came the sound of footsteps, slow, heavy, dragging footsteps moving back and forth in the hallway outside my door. My heart began to race. I grabbed the courage to open the door and peek into the corridor. The lights flickered above, casting long shadows on the peeling wallpaper. The hallway stretched empty in both directions. There was no one there. No movement, no sound, just the hum of the dim light above me. When I closed the door and locked it, the footsteps stopped instantly, as if whoever or whatever was walking had been waiting for me to look. I lay back down, pulling the blanket over myself like a child hiding from the dark. But sleep never came. The silence felt heavier than ever, pressing against my chest, reminding me that I was not alone. The next morning I stepped out of the apartment, exhausted after barely sleeping through the strange sounds of the night. As I locked my door, I noticed one of the neighbors standing a few feet away, an older woman with tired eyes and a face that looked like it had carried secrets for too long. She stared at me longer than what felt comfortable before finally speaking. "You're the new tenant," she said quietly. I nodded, trying to smile, but her expression remained serious, almost grim. She hesitated, as if debating whether she should continue, then leaned slightly closer. Her voice dropped into a whisper, and I could feel the unease in her tone. "Don't stay out too late, and whatever you do, never look into the mirror at midnight." I froze for a moment, unsure if she was joking or if this was some kind of creepy neighbor initiation, but there was nothing playful in her expression. Her eyes shifted nervously toward my door, then down the hallway, as if someone might be listening. Before I could ask her what she meant, she simply turned away and walked quickly back into her own apartment, shutting the door firmly behind her. The sound of the lock clicking echoed through the silent corridor. I stood there alone, her warning replaying in my head. The words were simple, but the way she said them carried a weight I could not ignore. It was not advice, it was fear. Real, bone-deep fear. As I stepped back inside my apartment, I caught my reflection in the hallway mirror. For just a split second, I thought I saw something else staring back at me. That night, I tried to convince myself that the warning from the neighbor was nothing more than superstition. I turned off the lights, pulled the blanket over myself, and told my mind to stay calm. But the silence of the apartment felt alive, almost like the walls were listening. Sometime past midnight, I woke up suddenly, my chest tight, as if something had pulled me out of sleep. My eyes adjusted slowly to the darkness of the room, and that is when I saw it. In the far corner near the dresser stood a figure, motionless, tall, darker than the shadows around it. For several seconds I could not breathe. My heart pounded so violently I thought it would burst through my ribs. The figure did not move, but I could feel it watching me. A thick, suffocating presence filled the room. I forced myself to reach for the lamp on the bedside table. My hand trembled as I turned it on, and in an instant, the light flooded the room. The corner was empty. No figure, no shadow, nothing. I sat frozen, staring at the space where it had been. My mind tried to tell me it was a dream, a trick of my half-awake state. But then I noticed something that made my blood run cold. The chair near the dresser was no longer against the wall. It had been moved slightly, angled toward my bed as if someone had been sitting there. I stayed awake until the morning light seeped through the curtains, too terrified to close my eyes again. The memory of that dark figure refused to leave my mind. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized that something real had been in the room with me. By the next day, I could no longer ignore the feeling that something was terribly wrong with the apartment. The warning from the neighbor, the noises, the shadow in the corner, it all pushed me to find out more. I decided to ask around. At first, no one wanted to talk. The people in the building avoided eye contact, as if even mentioning the apartment would invite something into their lives. But one of the older tenants finally spoke when I pressed him. His voice was low, careful, like he was telling me something forbidden. He said that people never stayed long in that apartment. Some left within weeks, others in only a few days. They complained of noises, of shadows, of feeling watched. And then he leaned closer, his tone dropping even further, almost a whisper. Someone had died there. The details were vague, but the story was enough to make my blood run cold. A man who lived in that same apartment years ago had been found dead under strange circumstances. No forced entry, no signs of struggle, just lifeless in the very room where I now slept. The police never found answers, and the case quietly faded away. Suddenly, everything began to make sense. The eagerness of the landlord, the unbelievably cheap rent, the nervous stares of the neighbors. This was not just an apartment. It was a place with a history, one that no one wanted to inherit. That night, as I sat in the living room with the dim light casting long shadows across the floor, I felt the weight of that history pressing down on me. The apartment was not just mine now. It belonged to something else, something that had been there long before me, and it was not going to let me forget it. On my final night in the apartment, the air felt heavier than ever before. It was as if the walls themselves knew something was about to happen. The silence was thick, broken only by the occasional creak of the old floorboards, though I was not moving at all. I tried to distract myself, keeping a small lamp on beside the bed, but my nerves refused to settle. It began with a whisper. Soft at first, like the sound of a draft slipping through a crack in the window, but then it grew clearer, forming words. My name over and over, low and breathless. Spoken from the dark corners of the room, I froze, every muscle in my body tightening as the sound circled around me. I forced myself to look toward the mirror across the room. For a moment, it was only my reflection staring back at me, pale and terrified. Then, without warning, a thin crack spread across the glass, with a sharp sound that made me flinch. The mirror seemed to shudder on its own, the broken line cutting through my reflection like a wound. Before I could move, I felt it again, the presence, stronger now, suffocating. My eyes darted to the corner where I had once seen the shadow, and this time it was not still. The figure stepped forward, slow, deliberate, each step echoing louder than the last, though its feet made no contact with the floor. I wanted to scream, to run, but my body would not respond. My vision blurred as the whispers grew louder, a chorus of voices surrounding me, filling the air with something I could not understand. The figure loomed closer, and I felt its cold weight pressing against me, pulling me into the dark, and then everything went silent. That was the last memory I have of the apartment. Whether I escaped or whether it claimed me like the others, I can no longer say. All I know is that the apartment still stands waiting for the next desperate tenant to walk through its doors.